Hello and welcome to the RCD ShareNet. And this is our new 3-month, 12-episode series. We just finished our first one on disability information, and this is our new one on parenthood and disability. A very sort of underserved topic in a lot of ways, and something that I've run into with different challenges myself and with other people I've worked with here. So we are really excited to have today from Toronto, Wendy, Porch, and Rebecca. And please introduce yourself, Wendy, and then we'll go to Rebecca, and then we'll chat.
Sure, thanks, Dave. I am Wendy Porch. I'm the Executive Director at the Centre for Independent Living in Toronto. And I am a person with a disability, and I am a proud parent too. And I'm really pleased to be here. I fundamentally believe in the capacity and the right of disabled people to be parents. I think we'll talk more about it, but we need more resources. We need a little bit more knowledge in the field out there to make those kinds of things happen. But disabled parenting is parenting fundamentally. It just looks a little bit different. So, thanks for having me here.
And Rebecca?
And I'm Rebecca Wood. I'm the coordinator of the Parenting with a Disability Network at the Centre for Independent Living in Toronto. So I am a prospective parent with a disability, and I have a master's in early childhood studies and have been working with families and children for about 18 years. So I'm very lucky that I get to coordinate this network.
Awesome. And so was there a huge how did the group sort of come about? Was there a massive need that you guys were responding to, or was it more organic?
So the PDN, or the Parenting with a Disability Network, has been part of CILT programming since back in the 80s. So it was a response to a need. The network's been around for a really long time and has kind of shifted and changed based on what families are needing. We're funded by the United Way, and our programming's kind of focused around Toronto and the GTA. But that being said, because there are so few resources for disabled parents, I get emails from folks in BC, I get emails from folks in Halifax, people across Canada kind of find us on Google and are looking us up. So yeah, I have been with the network for about 3 years now, but it's been around for many, many years.
I had an email one time for a woman to come and ask me to speak, and she was from Richmond, Virginia. And we're in Richmond, and I'm like, sure, if you want to pay for my airfare. She's like, oh, I should have checked Google a little bit more.
Can I add to that, Dave, too? So Rebecca's told you a little bit about the network in the context of CILT. And, I wasn't around with CILT in the 80s, so I can't speak specifically to the circumstances that precipitated the network being formed. But as a parent with a disability myself, and knowing some of the folks that were around CILT at the time, it seems to me to be pretty clear that it came from need from the community. So we know, for example, that there are no other networks really in Ontario that we're aware of that are specifically around supporting disabled parents, and very limited resources in terms of actual parenting programs or places to go when you're interacting with the medical system and you're a parent or a parent-to-be with a disability. So it definitely came from need. And in fact, I think both Rebecca and I would say that the need, despite the PDN existing, the need for more resources and more supports just continues to grow. So I think Rebecca daily responds to communications from parents-to-be and parents with disabilities who are looking for more resources, more connections, more advice, more links to things to help them be a parent, probably than ever before. And I also, myself as a parent with a disability, when I was, my kiddo's 9 now, which is kind of incredible. But when I was pregnant, and I was going to see the docs that I was seeing at the time, and I'm a connected person. I understand the system, right? I'm fairly good at advocating for myself. I still found that there was a deficit of resources for me to connect with in terms of understanding very simple things about how I was going to perform as a parent and what parenting was going to look like for me. So it did come from the community. I think it's been maintained because of community need. And in fact, I think we're just seeing those needs growing in the context of the work that we do.
And day-to-day management is a lot of stuff run by the parents as well now too, or like we have a group here that was our Chinese support group is mostly our users that are all 20 to 50 years old, but are at a certain age maturity wise, and they basically run their own organization now, and they will fund, they'll do stuff for us and things like that. Or is it more part of the office?
So it's part of our core programming
Right, okay.
at C.I.L.T. So I'm the sort of main point person, and we run workshops, events. We run a peer support group. We had a lot of contacts from parents with new babies or children kind of under 4. So we started doing a monthly songs and then discussion groups. So we do some songs and story time where the parents can bring their children and then have some peer support discussion after that. So I get inquiries from parents, from people considering parenting, from service providers who work with families who are looking for resources and information around parenting with a disability for specific folks. So it's kind of managed. A lot of different pieces are managed kind of through me, and we're a cross disability network. So we deal with figuring out resources and supports for all kinds of disabled parents.
Right.
And we really strategize with service providers too to make sure that they're considering the needs of all kinds of families, because disability is not always factored in to typical parenting programs or parenting resources.
I have a story that's I'd love your sort of thought on it. Is that I got phoned by someone from one of our rehab clinics about a year ago about a woman who was going to be in our city who can't get out of her condo because she gave birth as a able-bodied person and came out in a wheelchair with a rare spinal cord incident. And people kept saying, well, why does she get an apartment without an automatic door? I said, well, she wasn't in a wheelchair when she went in. And we had to try to figure out, because it was a strata, they didn't have to have an automatic door. There was lots of stuff for her in her apartment. They could get all kinds of things. But in the common area, she couldn't get out of her apartment because she wasn't in the chair when she went to the hospital to give birth. And I think I saw her on the street just a while ago, and I think she's doing really well. They've got some adjustments and everything for her now. But there's a perfect example, right?
Yeah, we get contacted by so many different folks, and sometimes it is people who become disabled through the process of giving birth. We have parents who've had strokes. So there's both the adjustment to being a new parent and the adjustment to disability happening.
That's just like the sheer weight of that. I just couldn't even imagine.
Becoming a parent is a big deal. And, I think part of what makes the network a useful space for folks is you can come to our songs and discussion group and not have to explain your disability. That we're a space where everybody's on the same page. Nobody has to prove themselves as a parent. Nobody has to explain why maybe lifting their 2-year-old out of the tub is a problem. Everybody just jumps into problem solving in a supportive way. And nobody feels like they have to justify or explain disability in the context of what we're doing.
I remember having to ask strange women in the park to put my son in the swing. And they look at me and it was just, not having to do that would be heaven. That's for sure.
I think just to add to this, and I have to do similar things. So, as a parent, for me, I mean, one of the things that was really tricky for me when my guy was born was just holding him, because you have to have two hands to hold your kiddo, and I have one, right? And so my husband had extra time off in terms of paternity leave, and we did it together, right? Every time I fed my son, my husband would pick him up and pass him to me. And I had one of those really hard breastfeeding trays, and I could kind of put him on there and hold on to him a little bit, and then I'd have to give him back for burping and things like that. So, there was definitely adjustment in the process, and it came down to fundamentally me and my husband working out what was going to work for me. And I think sometimes as disabled people, we look to experts and we look to other people for that information, and it usually doesn't reside there. It resides within us, right? It's what we know about ourselves that we sometimes just need to be given the space to pull that out. Mm-hmm. and to experiment and not feel bad about it, right? Because there's also these weird expectations about what parenting looks like. And my parenting didn't always look like that, right? But I wanted to say, like, in terms of the impact on our kids, I think that, just speaking for me, my son has a much better understanding of diversity, of the world being full of people who are different and do things in different ways, I think, than probably most of the kids that he knows. And so
Yeah.
in the same way that there can be things that you really wish you could do yourself or could have done yourself, there's also this piece of this wonderful piece of knowledge, frankly, of truth about how the world works, because disability has always been here, right? There have always been people with disabilities. There will always continue to be. And the idea that we're really different is just a modern spin on disability, right? That we're different. The structures are not designed for us. That's the problem, right? It's not that we've never existed before. But I just wanted to say, like, one of the things that's very interesting for me is that this added bonus for my kiddo of just how he operates in the world, and he sort of just appreciates that, he will point out people with disabilities to me for different reasons, right? My kid is like, yay, someone with a disability is here too, Mom, right? And his understanding of just how things work in the world, that we're all different, we all come at things differently. It looks a little bit different, but we're all kind of in the same space. I think
I have a friend that we're going to be interviewing for this project as well, named Eileen Davidson. She's very chronic. Eileen is her, and she's quite active in rheumatoid arthritis. But she's been documenting how her 6-year-old is sort of seeing the world, and some of the things she says it's just like, his empathy is just through the roof, right? He just sees things in a totally different way. And I was always very concerned about the collateral damage, I called it, of the illness. The pain and all that stuff. I handled it. I figured it out. But it was, how is it affecting my wife, my son, that sort of thing? That's the stuff that is the guilt and all that. That's the stuff that sort of hangs with me. And with a group, that's the stuff that you can sort of work through too as well. What is your biggest achievement, do you think, with your group?
I mean, just what you were talking about, Dave, like having those moments of peer support in real time and watching people. I think parents experience guilt no matter what. No matter what. Everybody's trying to do their best, and you can't always give your children every single thing that you're wanting to give. And so, having those spaces where parents can talk freely about those moments of pain and fatigue and whatever, and then people can strategize about what they do, like planning. I have Ziploc bags with activities that I can put out. So if I need to lie on the floor, my child can be beside me playing with this thing that's already set up. And just the fact that watching people problem solve together is a really lovely part of what we do.
I dragged my son around with a blanket tucked in my waistband, so I didn't have to carry him around the house.
Yeah,
he loved it. It's like, woohoo, right?
That's a frequent call I get, is problem solving around carrying and how to safely strategically carry. So building our resources to know, there's an organization in Toronto where before COVID, you could go and try on different baby carriers and see what works for your body. And they were a disability friendly space. Getting to sit on committees and research projects that are working towards structural change. We're on the advisory board for a pregnancy and disability study with U of T, where we talk about 1 in 8 pregnancies in Ontario is to a disabled person, and so when you look at the lack of resources and the stats on how many folks are needing resources or navigating these parenting issues, it's pretty stark.
And that's probably the answer to my next question, in the sense of what's been the biggest challenge is probably government red tape and all that sort of thing, I'm guessing.
Yeah,
do you
Wendy,
think for your group?
I think, there are always challenges with funding. I think we're all aware of that, right? I think maybe one of the largest challenges that we've seen consistently is a lack of understanding of disabled parenting in the broader healthcare system. So Rebecca's talking about 1 in 8 pregnancies in Ontario, and that's as a result of a research study that we're partners on, that the PDN is a partner on the advisory committee too. I know of 2 places, I think, in Ontario where people with disabilities, in fact, one, the Accessible Parenting Clinic at Sunnybrook Hospital, is the only accessible, overtly, calling itself accessible parenting center or clinic in Ontario. And that, when you look at the disparity between the numbers of people and the even just the sheer number of locations, right? Not even getting into the finer points around expertise or understanding. The disparity is huge. So I would say that the biggest challenge is actually a lack of understanding, a lack of training, a lack of knowledge around the capacity of people with disabilities to be excellent parents, bad parents, middling parents, but just parents, to be human parents, is one of the biggest stumbling blocks that we've had. There is no, as far as we know, there is no real kind of formal education for medical service providers, for healthcare folks, around understanding what parenting with a disability is not. And as a result of that, we also see that the kind of over surveillance of parents with disabilities and the impact that can have. So there have been a number of very high profile cases where people with disabilities, just by virtue of having a disability, have had their kids apprehended and taken into children's aid custody.
And that's that other scare part, because you probably hide a lot of that stuff because you may not get the chance to explain why you're doing a certain thing in the public, and then someone takes a picture and it's on social media or something, and right, and then the next thing you know, it's a mess, right?
Well, often, like we've been involved in some of those conversations, and it's not a role typically that we play, but we've been a resource that people have turned to in some of those conversations. And it's really just about encouraging service providers to actually remove the bias that they're coming at this whole situation with, and to really talk to the parents and to really look at what kinds of adjustments might have been made and whether or not it has the impact that they think. So the idea that because your parenting looks different, that it's automatically harmful is it's a profoundly harmful way of thinking about parenting. And so, if we were in a position to have at least a baseline level of understanding on the parts of healthcare providers and children's aid service folks around just what different parenting looks like, and that's okay too, there's no harm in just difference, I think that we would be a lot further ahead. So those are definitely some of the great challenges.
I had an incident when I can't drive because I fall asleep basically, and I have spasms. And so I would ride my son to school for years. And I had a stranger come up to me at the end of the school year, a parent, and she goes, "I have to admit that I avoid you when I see you on the road." I go, why? He goes, because my kids go, why can't we ride to school like Dave and his dad? And I don't
Yeah.
ride a bike. And she
See,
goes,
and
I've
at
been
the
guilty
start,
all year.
at the start of that conversation, you might have taken that in a different way, right?
Exactly,
Like, and
right?
you're like, oh, it's because your kids would like to be doing things the way that my kids do, right? So
I
it's an
always
important
remembered. I
lesson.
was just like, all right, sorry.
Yeah, you're making all
All
the other
righty.
kids jealous.
Yes. Yeah. It was like, I'm not riding my bike to school with them at 9 a.m.
I've heard that about kids whose parents use wheelchairs too, that some of the
Yeah.
other kids have been jealous that they don't get to just ride on
Yeah.
a chair
Yeah.
with their parent,
Exactly,
right?
right?
So yeah.
Yeah. It's all about that perspective. And I think this is an absolutely fantastic group. Even that, I was just thinking when you meant the accessible parenting clinic, I went, those are words I've just never heard. It even
Yeah.
thought of. That's just like, wow, that's just a sentence I've never heard spoken. So thank you very much for all your work and what you're doing. And that is about it for our interview today. If you have any sort of last words you'd like to mention, please do. And I think it's a great group. Let me know if you need someone to come in on Zoom and talk to your group. I'd love to do it sometime. What else would you like to say as we close up to parents out there?
Yeah, well, I was gonna say thanks for having us today, and these specific parent supports, I would love to see them at independent living centers across Canada, because it's a branch of the peer support that all of our centers are using as a fundamental basis, but having that specific focus on parents is something I would love to see more of.
And traditional support groups don't always work, right? The
Yeah.
woe is me sort of support groups sometimes, if they're not adjudicated properly and whatnot else, it's got to be something that is right for the people that are wanting to go, because it doesn't always serve everybody, right?
Yeah. Well, and when the folks who are coming into the room, the commonality is disability and parenting. Having a space where that's going to be safe and supported. We were talking about the over surveillance before. Parents going to their regular community center parenting groups can feel,
you're running around explaining,
exactly. So having a space where both parenting and disability can exist together without question or without...
I actually wouldn't go to those groups without my wife, because I was scared of that. And I wasn't going to, explain why I do the things that I did all the time. I was like, you have to come so that you can lift him or do this, so that I don't have to keep doing that, right?
Yeah,
And
I hear a lot of those stories. So having a space where first we can kind of be together without those outside worries and pressure, and also make some change so that those groups that exist to support parents become spaces where disabled parents don't have to be afraid to go. So there's kind of two levels of what we can be doing here.
Yeah, I agree, Rebecca. And I think one of the themes of our conversation today has been community, right? It's the power of community. And so, whatever we can do as a movement within IL, the IL philosophy, so all of us as independent living centers across Canada, to broaden out this idea of parenting, to provide these sorts of parenting supports and parenting resources, and to see parenting as being one of those same rights / risks / responsibilities that we see all of these other choices that we support disabled consumers to make. In the same way, we provide an opportunity for people to take the risk and to make mistakes, and to see all of that as being okay, and that you have a right to make choices. And I have to say, like, being a mom is the absolute best thing in my life. My life changed on the day that my little person arrived, and it stays that way. It's still the best thing I've ever done, hands down. And I think that there are people out there who are missing those opportunities. because of this narrow view that we have on who can be a parent and who can't. And whatever we can do to support opening those opportunities up, I think is extremely important. So we would love to work with you on over in Richmond on additional supports along these lines. So just let us know how we can do that.
All right. Well, you guys have a good afternoon, because it's afternoon for you guys. And that is it for the ShareNet today. And we will see you next week. Thank you, Rebecca. Thank you, Wendy, again. And I'm Dave Thompson. Have a nice day. Bye.
Bye.